What's the number one question I get in every consultation I do with DACA recipients wanting to get their green card through their employer or through their career? Can I just adjust my status? I re-entered with Advance Parole. And every time I have to say no, and it sucks. So I'm recording this so that I can tell you in advance and I don't have to see your disappointment. And so you can kind of understand why it is what it is and mentally process where we go from here, okay? So the reason that you've heard about why it's so important for you to use your DACA Advance Parole, and so that later on when you re-enter lawfully, you can adjust your status, usually by getting married. And so it totally makes sense that you would also think that if I have some other way to have someone petition for me, I could also adjust status through them. That's totally normal. And other lawyers actually sometimes are mistaken about this. But the reality is it doesn't quite work that way. And here's why. If you re-enter the country lawfully, whether that was when you were a kid through a tourist visa with your parents, or later on last week when you re-entered with your DACA Advance Parole, that's a lawful entry. You can then adjust status through an immediate relative petition. Immediate relatives are a spouse who's a U.S. citizen or a child who is a U.S. citizen over the age of 21. Those are immediate relatives for you, a DACA recipient who has lawfully entered the country and is over the age of 21, okay? So if you have those relationships and those people who can petition for you, a spouse or a kid who's a U.S. citizen, your kid's got to be older than 21, you can adjust status assuming no other issues exist. Like, I don't know about all your immigration history. I don't know about fraud and misrepresentation, other things that you might have, but you would be eligible to adjust status, okay? That's just for immediate relatives. For everybody else, including if you have a parent who's a U.S. citizen, including if you have a parent who's a lawful permanent resident, if you have a spouse who's a lawful permanent resident, you can't adjust status through those petitions. You instead, when you just have DACA, even if you have a lawful entry through Advance Parole or prior tourist visa or whatever, instead you would have to consular process. And that's the same thing with an employment-based immigration petition, an I-140. So if your employer petitions for you, even if you have all these lawful entries and your I-140 gets approved, the next step would be filing for a green card. But you can't do it in the U.S. because you cannot adjust status unless it's through an immediate relative, spouse, kid, American, kid over 21, okay? So what we have to do is through your employment-based petition or through your self-petition, through your career and your extraordinariness, or through your investment in the United States and creating jobs, is we have to consular process you in most cases. And when I say most cases, I mean we haven't had you re-enter on an H-1B or something kind of like really strategically out there. You would consular process. And by the way, even if we have you do H-1B, you would have to go to the consulate to do that anyway. So it's not going to save you anything if that's like something that you're toying around in your mind about right now. You have to consular process. So that's where we get into a conversation about, do you have unlawful presence? Do you need a 601A waiver to forgive that unlawful presence before you leave and things like that? That's not what this kind of podcast, training, whatever you want to call it, that's not what this is about right now. It really is just to teach you the distinction between why is it that when I do Advance Parole, and in some cases, I can adjust my status, but through business and employment-based, I can't. Why is that? And it all comes down to this one policy. The United States government prioritizes, when they created all this system, they said we prioritize immediate relative family reunification or family unification over everything else. And it's for when you're over the age of 21, the only immediate relatives that you can have are a spouse who's an American and a kid who's an American over the age of 21. Those are your immediate relatives when you are an adult over 21, okay? Everything else, you got a consular process. Everything else is a lower category. Everything else is deprioritized, and those immediate relatives are prioritized. So you can adjust status with those, which means green card in the USA, Everything else is going to be consular processing with very few exceptions. I hope this is helpful. I hope it clears things up. And if you're coming to a consultation with me, I hope that this prepares you so that you know a little bit more about the conversation that lies ahead. Thanks so much, my friends.